These are the opening prayers. Sashi Bhagi Chuchi Medanta Rirali Jinyende Gemba Dia Sangye Shindu Mide Uwagi Dugu Nanda Chinga Chuba Sho Idang Guru Ratna Mandala Kamne Yatayami Sangye Chudon Sugi Chonam La Janju Bado Dani Gyasu Jia Dagi Chinyen Gebe Sunangi Dola Benche Sangye Duba Sho Sangye chudang sugi chonam la janju badu dani gyasu chi dagi chi chi gebe sunangi dola benche sangye duba shu. Sangye chudang sugi chonam la janju badu dani gyasu chi dagi chi chi gebe sunangi dola benche sangye duba shu. All right, we have a few more folks joining us. I'm going to stop the share so that we can talk about that we can talk about what we've gone over and see if there are any questions. I hope there are, because we've done a big chunk and we just entered into the Mahayana last time. Um, those terms are sometimes used pejoratively, Hinayana and Mahayana. Um, Hinayana literally means small vehicle. And it's not referring to the Dharma teachings of Southern Buddhists. It's referring to a state of mind, a motivation. Mahayana, great vehicle, is again not referring necessarily to Northern school teachings of Buddhism. It's referring to the state of mind. And so that state of mind has to do with motivation. In a smaller motivation, one's just worried about oneself. And I don't want to be suffering. And so I want to get rid of suffering. It's not considered a bad thing in Buddhism to have that motive. However, it's not considered to have as extensive benefit to, to oneself and to others as a greater motive. When you enter the Mahayana, the wish is to become completely enlightened, to free all beings from suffering. And that's considered to be much more powerful and potent. So those first two levels are the subject matter of the first two principal aspects of the path. Renunciation, I want to be free of samsara. I don't want to suffer anymore. And then bodhicitta, that motive to help all beings be free. So any questions on those two? I'll share the screen and just show you a summary of it. This is actually a very beautiful text. It is actually the text that is kind of the basis for the three principal aspects of the path. It was attributed to Kunga Nyingbo, who was the founder of the Sakya tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And he is said to have had a vision of Manjushri. This image here, you see Manjushri in the background, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. And he sums up three aspects of the path in four lines. And so it's incredibly powerful. His son, Kunga Nimbo's son, Drapa Geltsen, um, composed a commentary to these four lines by Manjushri. And it said that when Tsongkhapa was alive and he started to get into the later phase of his life where he was studying Lam Rim, the stages of the path, it said that he started to be able to have visions of Manjushri and to talk with Manjushri. And so the three principal aspects of the path are also attributed to Manjushri, that this was Manjushri's guidance to Tsongkhapa that we're studying. So here's what Manjushri had to say to Kunga Nyingpo. Tsendi, he's And I'm doing this for Bobby because Bobby's asked about Tibetan. This sa here, and then a dremel above it makes a tse sound. And that's referring to life, your life. D, this syllable, there's a silent ah syllable. Ao, da, iku, D. So that D means now or here. So this life, la, means to this life. Shen, sha, jumbo, shin, shen means to cling or to have attachment. So attachment to this life, na, if you have attachment to the well-being of just this life, and that's where all your focus is, jipa, cha, naro, cho, sa, chi, ba, jipa means a Dharma practitioner. Min, ma, giku, mi, na, min means none. So if there's clinging to just this life, you can't say you're practicing Dharma. That's not Dharma at all. That's just ordinary life where you're born and you try to find happiness in the here and now. And if you don't find it, you're really disappointed. If you do, it goes to your head, right? But then it's short and then it's over. And then you're on to your next life. So there's no Dharma in that kind of lifestyle. Dharma is that which holds us back from suffering and that which can lead us to ultimate freedom. So that's that first level of motivation in the three principal aspects of the path that we talked about, the way to overcome it. Does anybody remember how you overcome clinging to just this life? There was a line. I don't know if you can remember it. Del Jorneka Sela Lome Pa. That's the Tibetan. Del Jor means leisure. Jor means fortune, the 8 leisures and 10 fortunes. Del Jor Nyeka, contemplating that they're very hard to find. It's very hard to find a life like what we have now. Sela Lome Pa means that the span of the life is indefinite. There's no certainty about when you're going to die. Right? So right now you have an incredibly precious human form, and with it you can accomplish all sorts of spiritual well-being, but it doesn't last long, right? So it's like you won the lottery, but you don't know how long you have to spend it before it's gone, and you're off to the next life. So that's how you turn back the clinging to just this life. So the second line gets into the second level of renunciation, which is the next 2 lines in the aspects, three principal aspects of the path, where it says, Lende milu yanyas chime. I'll get to it. Actually, I better get the text in front of me before I misquote it. But the English translation is um, thinking about the infallibility of cause and effect and the various sufferings of samsara, turn back clinging to hoping for future life well-being in samsara. That's basically the translation of it. So the line and the 4 clingings that corresponds to that part of the 3 aspects of the path, Gorwa is samsara. Gora really means just spinning. We're spinning out of birth and death again and again. La means to, that cycle of existence. Shen, that's the same word as before, meaning attachment or clinging. Na if you're clinging to samsaric existence, Nyanjung Men, you're not a you're not a renunciate. There's no renunciation there. If you're constantly craving and thinking somehow that samsara is going to make you happy, then you haven't found renunciation. So these first two lines of these four lines sums up the first principal aspect of the path, renunciation. And again, the way you get past that clinging to hopes of happiness in samsara is by thinking about the different sufferings that samsara gives us. You contemplate that again and again until you kind of go, oh, no, this isn't for me. And then you think about the inevitability of how causes lead to effects. There's a there's a relationship that's infallible, and those effects, the power of them grows over time. So good or bad, what you do is going to come back to you. Um, all right, so that those first two lines are that first principal aspect of the path. The third line here gets into the second principal aspect of the path. Wrong dun. Wrong means oneself. Dun means benefit. La, to that, to one's own welfare, to one's own well-being. Xianna, if you're attached to that. Jongsim means bodhicitta, the mind of wanting full enlightenment to benefit all beings. Min means none. You're not a bodhisattva. If you're just like clinging me, then you don't enter into the Mahayana, that great vehicle of that's where do Buddhas come from? They come from that great vehicle. Bodhicitta, that wish to become enlightened, to benefit all beings, is their fuel. And they follow that and they act on that. They enact the bodhisattva activities. And when those activities ripen to full extent, they become a fully enlightened Buddha. That's where they come from. And so if you don't have that bodhicitta, and you're just focused on yourself, and there's no bodhisattva. Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, so a quick question. I'm familiar with Theravada Buddhism, of course, but can you kind of contrast the two? Like, I know the fundamental difference, but I mean, they are part of the Sangha. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
what role does that play in the big picture of things? And I guess do I don't like to say Hinayana, but what is their ultimate goal? Is it really just the nirvana and just cease coming back? Is that it? Or
Yeah. Yeah. It's to stop suffering completely. The Sanskrit word for that is nirodha, which means to extinguish. And it's extinguishing the causes of suffering so that one no longer has to endure cyclic existence and the suffering that comes along with cyclic existence. So the Theravada, that means the elders, right? There was a little bit of name calling between the northern schools and the southern schools that happened long ago. Um, but basically, in the Mahayana school, there are two levels of that school that are referred to. One's called the Shravakas, which really means those who listened or the hearers. And so basically, what happened when Buddha was alive, he taught, and disciples came around him, and he taught to whatever level came to him and what they needed. And then after he had passed away, they had a series of gatherings in which they tried to recall everything he had taught. And one of the monks who was very devoted to the Buddha was named Ananda. And Ananda had an amazing recall. And so um, if you read the scriptures from that school, very often they start, "Thus have I heard," and that's from Ananda saying, "This is what I heard him say." And so they wrote down all those scriptures, and that became the basis for what's called the Pali Canon. And so the Theravadan school says that's what the Buddha taught. This stuff that Mahayana people, that was made up later. That's not even what Buddha taught. And you can understand why they would say that, right? Based on the history. And so within that, the main thing that the Buddha taught was the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, how to become aware of suffering and what causes suffering, and how to free yourself from it. However, even within the Theravadan canon, like if you read some of the longer discourses in the Digha Nikaya, um, they talk about bodhisattvas. There's mention of the path of bodhisattvas. There's a mention of the future Buddha, they call it Maitreya instead of Maitreya. And so there is that sense of this other path, though it's not well fleshed out. But Buddha did teach about it. So um, what happened is, along with those teachings, the Mahayana holds that Buddha did teach some other things to a few select disciples. Like, for instance, there was one king, Kawasangbo, Suchanda is the Sanskrit. He wanted to become enlightened without leaving his kingdom. And he asked the Buddha, is there a way to do that? And it said that the Buddha manifested the mandala of Kalachakra and taught that tantra to the king in a Mahayana discourse. And the king became enlightened while still the king of Shambhala. And thus the legend of Shambhala and the sense of um, well, anyway, there's a whole legacy that came down from that. However, that wasn't taught to everybody. And so those special teachings, many of them were secretly taught. Also, after the Buddha passed, um, before he passed away, he had predicted um, several disciples. Like, for instance, he predicted Nagarjuna, who appeared 400 years after he passed. And Nagarjuna is the one who retrieved the Perfection of Wisdom sutras. There's a whole myth that he got it from the Naga kingdom and he brought back these sutras. Maybe he did. I don't know. Um, my dental hygienist, I know this is a side story, but she showed me this fossil of a naga in Thailand, way off in the jungle, and it is really wild to look at it. She gave me the pictures of it. Um, it looks like a huge snake, and this coiled body that goes back into a cave system, right? So, so they really believe there were these naga spirits that were alive at some point. And so it said that Nagarjuna somehow entered into that kingdom and retrieved these scriptures they had been holding. So I don't know. I don't know. But the Perfection of Wisdom sutras did appear about the same time as Nagarjuna, and they were written in Sanskrit. Sanskrit appeared about the same time as the Buddha. So Serme Rinpoche said that the Theravadan or the hearers heard what the Buddha said in Pali, but that he actually was speaking Sanskrit, but then people heard it in their own language. Anyway, those are the kind of controversies that go back and forth between these two schools. But basically, some of the sutras that reveal the Mahayana path and the Bodhisattva path did come from later sages who appeared in India. One Nagarjuna and a Sangha. Nagarjuna um, wrote on the profound view of emptiness and dependent arising. And after him, a Sangha, um, it said that a Sangha had a vision of Maitreya Buddha, the future Buddha, who gave him 5 texts. And those 5 texts outline the Bodhisattva, one of them is the Bodhisattva Bhumi, the stages and path of the Bodhisattva path. And so, and so you can understand why the Theravada said, no, these are, that's not what Buddha taught. But you can also understand um, the Mahayana point of view that, yeah, those came from the Buddha, just at a later time and through another voice. The Dalai Lama has said that it's understandable that if the language had moved on by the time Nagarjuna and Asanga appeared, that they would teach in the language of the people of the day, which was Sanskrit. And so it's understandable why those sutras would be in Sanskrit instead of Pali. But Maitreya, his teacher was the Buddha, and so it's thought to come from Buddha to Maitreya to Asanga. Nagarjuna, his teacher was Manjushri. Manjushri's teacher was the Buddha, so it's thought to come from the Buddha to Maitreya, I mean to um, Manjushri to Nagarjuna, and also to Shantideva, who was another expounder of Mahayana. And so you have to, what do you think? Given that long answer, are they both valid or just one of the traditions valid? But the people who believe that those Mahayana sutras are valid um, believe that that's the path of the Bodhisattva that is mentioned in the Pali Canon. So anyway, we're all part of the Buddhist family. that's kind of where the controversy has been. Right. I'll go back um, to these 4 lines because they do encapsulate the Mahayana point of view. So those first 3 lines, again, sum up the first 2 principal aspects of the path. This,
Actually, Wilson, I do
yeah,
have, I have a question. I'm sorry. Sometimes my mind is slow these days.
oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Um, I know that um like Chinese or Asian or some of them that practice more Theravada, but they also have Mahayana also, right?
Right, right, yeah.
So I just find that confusing. I mean, how do they cross, is it the same as what we do, or is their version different?
Chinese Buddhism is really interesting. A lot of the scriptures that both Mahayana and Theravada scriptures got translated into Chinese.
Right.
One of the main, how can I say them? There are these beings, there are these luminous beings throughout the history of Buddhism. In Tibetan, they're called Shinta Jempo, which really means great charioteer.
Hmm.
And that term has been translated as innovators, great innovators who took the Buddha's teachings and unfolded a new perspective on them. And one of them who brought Buddhism into Japan and China was named Bodhidharma. You all heard of Bodhidharma?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was a great sage, very practical. You often see him in Japanese paintings with wide eyes wide open.
Uh,
He's had
Now that's probably where I've seen it, but yeah.
one too many cups of coffee. But he a few scriptures are attributed to him and they're very much focused on meditation and wisdom. That's this final principle of the path. And Zen Buddhism and Chan Buddhism kind of came down through Bodhidharma, but also other scriptures ended up going and being translated into Chinese too. So they have a huge canon of both
Oh, they have,
Theravada.
do they have more than everybody else?
No, the Tibetans, I think, have the most, or at
Most?
least the
Okay,
Tibetans like to think, because they were relatively insulated because they were in this high mountain plateau. And
right.
so while all the countries around them were going to war and being invaded,
Yeah.
Tibet was relatively unscathed. And so they brought all those traditions into Tibet and translated them and preserved them. And so I think,
So a lot with the Tibetans, they were willing to take on other people's teachings when they were introduced. Is that
yeah,
correct? I mean, they sort of incorporated um, teachings from other cultures, right?
to a degree, they were Tibetans were very devoted to the sages who came out of India, in
Right.
particular, out of the Nalanda tradition of India.
Hmm.
Um, and so they did have one of the sages from Japan, no, from China, came into Tibet at the time of King, I think it was Trisong Detsen, one of the early kings who now is thought to be of the same continuum as the Dalai Lama, but
Hmm.
very early in the history of Tibet. Um, and he was teaching a form of meditation that's very much like Zen. And there was a debate between people who got devoted to that and people who were following the Indian tradition of Buddhism. And so King Trisong Detsen allowed this Chinese um, monk named Hashang, to come to the court and debate against one of the top scholars from India named Kamalashila. This is a very famous historical debate that happened in Tibet. And the way it started was Hashang said to Kamalashila, my enlightenment is like the Garuda suddenly appearing in space. And then Kamalashila said, did your Garuda come from an egg or just suddenly spontaneously? So that's how they started their debate. And they went through a logical debate about the forms of Buddhism they had studied. And then there was a show of miracles. And it said that Kamala Shila won the debate hands down. And so that the
Daniel.
king the king went towards that Indian form of Buddhism that had come through Kamala Shila. Although Hoshang's tradition continued to remain and influence schools of Buddhism. So there was cultural parlay. Tibetans didn't always accept what came from other cultures, but sometimes they did. But again, they liked the Indian traditions. When there was one king named King Long Dharma who did not like Dharma, he didn't like Buddhism, and so he started destroying the monasteries and killing the monks and pretty much wiped out Buddhism in Tibet. And then later there was a king after Dharma was assassinated by a yogi in a cave who came out. And anyway, long story. But later there was another king who brought Joel Atisha, who was a top scholar in India, to come to Tibet and reestablish Buddhism. And so a lot of the traditions, particularly the one that I studied, the Gelugpa tradition, were very highly influenced by Atisha. Um, Sakya, Kagya and Geluk were very influenced by him. Nyingma, the old tradition of Tibet, also got influenced by Atisha, but that survived long Dharma. And so that one, anyway, Nyingma was started before that by Padmasambhava. So there are these sages, innovators who kind of started these traditions, but a lot of them came back to Indian Buddhism. Padmasambhava was brought from India as well. So long story, interesting history if you ever want to dive into it. Very complicated, but very interesting. All right, so those first three lines get into the first two principles of the path, and this last line gets into the one that we're about to go into. Zimba means to hold. And this is talking about a term called the Tibetan is Dagzimba, holding to a self. Dak means I, and it's sometimes translated as I grasping, grasping at an I. Juna, if that arises, Dawa means correct view or view, men, none. If you're grasping at a self-existent me, you don't have correct view. And so that gets into the last aspect of the path, which I thought I'd present to you. That's here. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the definition of samsara that we talked about a few classes ago. Sakchen yerling ki pungbo yupa na. Sakche means contaminated. Yerlen ki pungbo means closely grasped aggregates or form heap, feeling heap. Um, I'll call it conceptual heap, volitional heap, our awareness heap, all those parts of our body and mind, contaminated by karma and afflictions. Yundu, continually. Yangne, yangdu, again and again. Lembe, lemba means taken up. So in samsara, again and again, because of our afflictions and karma, we take on contaminated aggregates, one body after another. And then the body lasts and it dies. We take another body again and again and again. Gorwa yen, that is samsara. That is what cyclic existence is. And so this last aspect of the path is, can anything be done about this? Are we, are we destined to continually suffer? And the last aspect of the path is we don't have to suffer. There's a way to stop that continual spiraling in existence. So this is it. This is the beginning of that cure. What's the cure for what ails us? Ne Luke um, means the way of abiding, or if you will. And Neluk is referring to emptiness, that final teaching that the Buddha gave on the lack of inherent existence of ourselves, our aggregates, and of the world and everyone. Dokpe means to realize that ultimate nature of ourselves and our aggregates. Shara means wisdom that sees the emptiness of our selves and our aggregates. Midana means if you do not have that, If you do not have that wisdom, realizing your own nature, Nyanjung, let's say you have, Nyanjung is renunciation. Let's say you have renunciation. Zhongju Sem, let's say you have bodhicitta, a wish to become enlightened, to free all beings. La, to those, Gomje Kyang, even though you accustom yourselves and you meditate on those and you become genuine in your renunciation and your bodhicitta, even though Kyang, Sipa Tsawa, Sipa is a translation in Tibetan of the Sanskrit word bhava, which means existence. And it's talking about samsaric existence, existence in that wheel of suffering. Tsawa means the root of samsara. Chupa means to cut the root that keeps you in suffering and psychic existence. Minupa means you won't be able to. So even though you have renunciation, even though you have bodhicitta, if you don't have the correct view of how things really are, you're not going to be able to get out of samsara. Deshir, therefore, tendel means dependent origination. Tope means realizing dependent origination. Dalabe, tab means the method. To that method, be means exert yourself. Exert yourself in the method to realize tendril. So why tendril? Why is because he starts here Neluk, which means nature. And that's talking about the nature of emptiness, that things are empty of any self nature. But to get there, he talks about, well, you need to realize Tendril, dependent origination. This is like a key. If you realize this, you won't go astray. If you don't realize this, you're going to get lost. In trying to get to the correct view in Buddhism, there are two extremes. One is called nihilism, where you think something doesn't exist, even though it does exist. The other is called eternalism. Jeta, Datta. Datta, eternalism, is that view that things have some kind of eternal, self-existent nature. So I'm I'm going to stop the share for a second so we can talk about this because I'd love to get any feedback, as we talk about this. So what is it that's being refuted? When we talk about emptiness, that there's no self nature, what is that exactly? Does anybody have a sense of what that means? It's said that if you don't understand this one point, the Tibetan word for it is gakcha, which means the object being refuted. If you don't understand what's being refuted, all the rest of the logic that's about to come will not make sense to you and it won't benefit you. Sarah Rinpoche compared it to, let's say, Pete Hegseth, for example. He has this mighty army and military at his disposal, but if he doesn't know what the target is, none of that is of any use. And of course, war is a terrible thing, and so let's hope Hegseth doesn't know what the target is. But the danger is if you have this arsenal of military and you don't know what the target is, you're going to blow up things you shouldn't be blowing up, right? So in this case, what we're trying to refute is a misheld concept deeply ingrained in our psyche. And to be able to correctly use correct view, you have to find it in yourself. It's not good if it's just some little concept oh yeah, there's no self-existent I. Well, what is that internally? Where is that? How do you find it? Um, so anyway, I want to challenge you first to try to get hold of your own sense of me and mine. And how do you hold those in your mind? A good way to do this is if you've ever been falsely accused of something, try to remember a time when somebody's falsely accused you of something and what happens to your mind. No, I didn't. At that time, there could be a very strong sense of me, right? And also mine and territory, right? Um, I heard from Sharon that today on an interview, our loving president got really offended when questioned about whether his his election denial was factual or not. He got up and he stomped on the microphone and left the interview. But that's a good example right there. That sense of me, mine, territory. So the object trying to be that's being targeted by the logic to follow is an internal sense of an individual, me, that's self-sufficient, exists of itself, and is not dependent. So that's why in the same verse, it says, strive to realize dependent origination. So that me, if you get hold of it, where did it come from? So just start with yourself now. Where did you come from? What came a year ago that produced what you are now? And what came 40 years ago that produced that? And what came at the time of your conception that started to produce your body and your mind? And when were you labeled with your name? And as you start then looking at the dependent origination of just yourself and your body, you can see for yourself that that solid, independent me is an illusion. It's not really true, is it? That you're an independent me, right? You are dependently originated completely. So many factors and causes and conditions had to come together so that you can now call yourself me, right? And so that illusion of a solid, independent me is what sets into motion all of our suffering. I'm just going to call up the wheel of existence again so you can see this again is the marquee, the cosmic marquee. You are here. According to the Buddha, here's where we are. Um, this inner hub is what drives cyclic existence. Ignorance, that holding to a self-existent me and mine, not knowing how karma works. Out of that comes desire, anger, and all the afflictions. Out of that nexus, we start producing karma. There's virtuous karma that takes us up into existence, into better realms. There's negative karma that pulls us down into more and more misery. There are different realms of existence that we've been spinning in and out of. Birth after death, death after birth, and again and again and again, clinging to the contaminated aggregates that we're born into. In the very inception of it, on the outer rim here, are the 12 links of how karma ripens, is how it's created. The very first link is this blind man. He's got a staff because his view is unfirm and his body's unfirm. He doesn't know where he came from. He doesn't know where he's going. Um, that primordial ignorance of being a self is what sets karma into motion. If we are able to dispel that ignorance from our mind, we stop creating karma. That's the end of suffering. Because once we, holding that ignorance in mind of an individual self, once that enters into action, the second link, creating karmic causes and conditions, then it's transported by the mind into a body. The body develops sense powers, and there's contact between the sense powers and observed objects. Then there's feelings of pleasure and pain, indifference. Then there's initial craving into great craving, into becoming. And then when we die, that karmic, that fully ripened karma that was started way up with ignorance takes us into a new birth. And once there's a new birth, that ends in old age and death. And that's how we've been spinning again and again. So if you stop the ignorance, there's no karmic creation. If you stop karmic creation, there's no transporting of that karma into a future life. If there's no future um, contaminated becoming, then we don't end up in a contaminated body and contaminated sense perceptions, contaminated contact, contaminated feelings, craving stops, extreme craving stops. Karma doesn't become, it doesn't shape us into what we're going to become. And there's no birth or death. There's freedom if we can stop this first link of ignorance. So that's why this is so important. If we can understand thoroughly dependent origination, we can eliminate that ignorance that's been spinning us in and out of birth and death. So that'll bring us to the next verse. Gangxi means whatever. Form means cyclic existence. Te means beyond cyclic existence, which is a referral to refers to nirvana. Chunam, those dharmas, both in existence and in nirvana. Damsheki, all of their. Gu means causes. Dre means effects. Namyang is the beginning of saying never. I'll show you how that's put together. Namyang Lua means um, um, fallible. Me means not. So they're never fallible. The relationship between causes and their effects. Once a cause is created, it's related to its effect. It grows over time. It'll definitely give an effect. And the nature of the effect is in accord with the nature of the cause. So if it's a virtuous seed, it produces happiness. If it's a non-virtuous karmic seed, it'll produce suffering. Dong means you got to see that. That's the first step. You got to see that everything in samsara and nirvana is based on that cause and effect. So why nirvana? Why is everything in nirvana also cause and effect? Because if you've reached nirvana, you kind of step out of that cycle of dependent arising. Not dependent arising, the cycle of karmic causation. You step out of. However, for nirvana to occur, there is kind of a causation in that you have to eliminate the afflictions, right? And so you have to apply wisdom. For wisdom to be thoroughly applied, you have to perfect meditation. For meditation to be fully developed, you have to practice morality. And so those three things are causes that eventually wear down the afflictions and the ignorance that drives the afflictions until they're extinguished. So there's not really an effect in terms of, oh, here's nirvana, the effect, but there is an effect from the sense that the afflictions are eliminated, and so that the mind is no longer clouded by afflictions and suffering. So anyway, that's one aspect of dependent arising. You have to realize that all causes and effects are infallible. And there's another thing here. Mikpa means an object. This is an object of mind. And again, I said for this to be effective, you have to realize the part of your mind that holds to a real me and a real mind. That's the object that's being referred to here. In a way, this mikvah can refer to any object, internal or external, that we hold in our minds. Eso, um, the way that we hold it, way that we hold that in our minds. Eso is a focus, a focal object. Ganyan, whatever it is, Kunshikpa means when it's thoroughly annihilated. And the way that happens is this is talking about a meditation that's done to start to be able to understand emptiness. So I'll just do this so you understand what's being referred to here. I had you earlier try to get in touch with your own sense of me and mine. I want you to get back to that and just hold that in mind, whatever you found. Okay, this is the real me, right? And you have it vividly in your mind. So the next step is to analyze that internal focal object of the self and look at it analytically. It's a little bit like keeping your mind calm, holding that focal object in your mind, and then ask yourself a series of questions. So if this independent me is real, it's either a single thing or it's multiple things, right? So let's start with the first. It's a single thing. This me is a single thing. So if this is a single thing, is it your body or is it your mind? Because if it's a single thing, it can't be both, right? It's got to be either your body or your mind, this single me. Well, let's say it's your body, this me, this independent me is my body. Well, then which part of your body is it? Is it your nervous system? Is it your digestive system? Is it your cardiovascular system? Is it your pulmonary system? Your reproductive system? Is it somewhere in your skin, your bones, your cells? Um, if you imagine the different parts of your body kind of spewed out across your living room floor, nowhere in that are you going to find that independent me. Okay, so let's say you give up on that idea that the self is in the body somewhere. So that would mean if it's a singular thing, it must be in your mind, right? All right, so let's look at the mind. Is your mind your feelings of pleasure, pain, indifference? Because those are multiple things, right? Or is your mind your conceptual patterns, different discriminations and different thoughts that you have? And where did those come from? How did you learn language? So is that the independent me? Or is the independent me your volitions of the impulses that guide your actions, for better or worse, your desire, your anger, your jealousy, your love, your kindness? Because that's multiple things, right? Or is the individual self, independent self, is it your awareness? Is it your awareness of sights, of sounds, smells, taste, touch? Is it your mental awareness? If so, which moment of mental awareness is it? Mental awareness of a second ago or the mental awareness of now, right? Because there are lots of parts and the mind's constantly shifting, isn't it? So where's this singular independent self in the mind? Can you point to it? So if you haven't found this individual singular self in your body or mind, then how about if you say, okay, well, the self is multiple. It's like all those things. And so then you end up in the extreme position that you have multiple selves, right? And so then you end up in another problem, which is that sense of self. If you took apart all the parts of the body and mind, there should be something left over that you can say is the self if you say that the self separate from the body and mind, right? But if you take all those parts apart, what's left over? Nothing left, is there? So then you can say, well, it's the combination of all those things. But that means it's not independent, right? And so that whole notion of an independent me is a fallacy. And so that's what's being described here, that meditation where you kind of take that focal object apart critically, intelligently. And kung chikpa means it's completely annihilated. That originally held assumption, you just completely dispel. Dene, at that time, when you're able to do that, Sangye Gepe Lamla Shuk, you have entered the path that pleases the Buddhas. So when for you, you can see that things arise on cause and effect infallibly, and that there's no focal object that exists independently, you've entered the path that pleases the Buddhas. And there are different levels of that entry. There's right now it's a conceptual level as we kind of go through it. But as you practice and you perfect your meditation, eventually it can become an experiential realization that there's not a self there. There's not an independent self in your body or mind. And when you can keep that in the context of seeing cause and effect, then you're not in either of those extremes of nihilism or eternalism. Um, which leads us to the next verse. Nangwa means appearances. This is a very important word. When you open your eyes in the morning, different things appear to you. When you hear things, different things appear to your mind as you hear things or smell things, taste things, sense things, right? All of those appearances are dependently arisen. For a moment of eyesight, it depends on a valid functional eye power, a valid object that has shape and color and light to it, and then a cognition of that shape and form, right? Lots of things are involved in a moment of eye consciousness, right? So all of those things are on the appearance side. Nangwa, tendrel means dependently originated, dependent origination. Luamepa, and again, that's infallible. The causation, cause and effect is infallible of that appearance side of dependently arisen things. Dong means Dongpa Kelen. Dongpa is the emptiness. We just did the meditation seeing the emptiness of our preconceived sense of I and me. So that emptiness, right, that other part of this wisdom we're trying to develop, Kelen means accepting that emptiness. Yeah, that self is not existent. That self that I was holding to is non-existent. Drella means separate. Those are two separate things. That emptiness and that appearance of dependent arising. They're two separate things. Goani means you conceive of those as two different things. GC, as long as you do that, as long as you think emptiness is a separate thing than appearance and dependent arising, so nangwa, that those are individually appearing. When you see the emptiness of the focal object, there's no appearance of dependent arising in your mind, just emptiness. Or when you look at forms and shapes, your sense of emptiness disappears. You just see the appearance of things. As long as those things are appearing alternately as two separate things, they say do, as long as that's occurring to you, doing still, tupe gongba, the thought of the able one, the thought of the Buddhas, Dokpa me, you have not realized it yet. So this is a crucial thing, because what can happen when you start thinking about this, your mind can fall between the extremes of nihilism when you see emptiness, oh, nothing exists, really, to eternalism when you see dependent arising and appearing objects. Oh, things really exist. They're truly there, right? You can have those two disparate appearances alternating in your mind. For as long as that's happening, Tsongkhapa is saying you haven't realized Buddha's intent. Um, should I go forward, or does anybody have questions at this point? You all okay? All right. So it gets to the next point. Namshik means at some point, sometime. Rejok means alternating, that emptiness and that appearance of dependent arisings, alternating. Mepa means none. At some point, they'll stop alternating. Chikchardu, they'll appear at the same time. So you see something relatively arising in your field of awareness of appearances, and your thought that it's empty will be there at the same time. Tendral milu, the infallibility of dependent arising. Dongwa, you'll be able to see that. Samyine, and at the same time, Neshe Yogi, you'll have certain awareness, Yogi Zimtang, that your way of holding to the focal object, Gongshik, is completely destroyed. So at the same time you're able to see the infallibility of dependent arising, you'll be able to see that fiction of an inherent nature to whatever your focal object is, you'll be able to see it dissolve and completely be destroyed in your mind's eye. Now, when that happens, they say at that time, Dawe, correct view, Jepa, your analysis of correct view, Zokbalak is complete. So that's the goal, to get to the point where you can see that those two things are not contradictory. Their rising of things, their appearance, their um, um, infallible relationship between cause and effect, and also their emptiness, that they're empty of any self nature, including yourself. So those two things can appear at the same time. Shenyang means moreover, Nangwei, by seeing the appearance of things and the dependent arising of things, Yuta, the extreme of true existence, Sawa, is cleared away. So this is when your analysis gets more refined and your logic gets more refined and your experiential experience of emptiness gets more refined. Eventually, when things appear, just their appearance and their dependent origination nature will clear away any sense of holding to things as if they exist from their own side, as if they're independent. Dongbe, by emptiness, when you see the emptiness of things in yourself, meta, nihilism, the extreme of nihilism, cell is dispelled. So for me to see the emptiness of Wilson, I first have to have a sense of this thing labeled Wilson. And so when I see the emptiness of Wilson, it depends on there being a basis of, of, of Wilson to be analyzed, right? And so when you see emptiness, you're not seeing it as something separate from the object that you're analyzing. Xing means and. Dongbani, that emptiness. Yudon Dawar, Yudon Dre means Drebur, cause and effect. Yudon Drebur. Jarwa, appearing. Sulshe Na, if you have the awareness of the method in which emptiness appears in cause and effect, so you see emptiness in causal relationships, you see the empty nature of things through cause and effect. Darzin, holding to those extreme views of nihilism and eternalism, Dawe means those views. Rokbar means stolen away. Migur, you will not become stolen away by those views of eternalism and nihilism. The problem with eternalism and nihilism is they take you away from the path. Because nihilism, like if you start to doubt cause and effect, for example, then you won't be mindful of your karma. And that's the path to ruin. If you hold something as truly existent, like I'm Wilson the Mighty and I'm always going to be Wilson the Mighty, then you don't think you have to take care of your karma either, because you're always going to be this person. And that's not realistic either. So those two extremes steal you away from the path. So when you have that way of seeing emptiness, independent arising, you'll never be stolen away by those two thieves of your spiritual path. Etara means like that. Lam Gitso, the principal um, aspects of the path, Nam Sum, those three types of principal aspects of the path. Nenam means the points of them. Rangi, by yourself, in oneself. Jishin Tope Se, realize them exactly. You have to come back to this subject matter again and again and again and analyze it and think about it and contemplate it until you realize it. Say means when you do, when you realize these three aspects of the path and you integrate them and you start to develop real renunciation, real bodhicitta, real correct view. Wempa 10, go into retreat. Wempa is retreat, and there are instructions on how to do various forms of retreat. Dande, Tundru, means make effort. Okay means strong effort. Ge means generate very strong effort. When Tsongkhapa went into retreat, um, he did so many prostrations, the rock outside his cave became smooth. He did so many mandala offerings that you could see the bone in his arm. And he made the rock smooth that he used. Um, just incredible effort. And he started to have visions and realizations, and he became completely enlightened by the time he finished his life. Dengi Dumma means your ultimate goal, the goal of full enlightenment. Nyurdu means quickly. Drug Bu, achieve it, my child, is what Tsongkhapa is saying. Bu means son, but it could be interpreted as son. Um, who he's talking about?
Yeah.
There was a disciple, one of his disciples. Um, in fact, this is in the colophon, I think. Talks about this disciple. Yeah. Shepa saying that Dini Mongdutupa means somebody who listened to a lot of teachings. Gelong means the monk. Losong Drapa, Sumata Kirti, that's Tsongkhapa. Belgi means glorious Tsongkhapa. Tsongkhapa. Um, Ngawang Drapa, that's his disciple that he wrote this for. Ngawang Drapa, La Dambo composed this for him. There's an interesting story about Ngawang Drapa. I'll unshare with this last part because it's kind of a fun story. Um, it said that Ngawang Drapa was a very devout monk, but he was very realized. Sermikin Rinpoche said he was a former incarnation of Pabanka Rinpoche. He was in that line. Um, but both, I think it was Gyaltsab Je, let me make sure. Um, yeah, it was Gyaltsab Je. Gyaltsab Je was one of the main two disciples of Tsongkhapa. Both Gyaltsab Je and Tsongkhapa knew that Ngawang Drapa had the potential to found many, many monasteries throughout the region that he had come from. but he was very content being in the monastery with them. And so Gyaltsab devised a plan to get him expelled from the monastery. This sounds like really terrible stuff. It was hardball. But what he did is there was a special ceremony the monks had to attend to keep their vows. And Gyaltsab scheduled it earlier in the day and didn't tell Gowan Drakpa. He told everybody else to keep it secret from him. And so Gowan Drakpa woke up and he could hear them reciting this ceremony that he had to attend to keep his tenure in the monastery. And so he went running to the um, recital hall, but the doors had been locked, so he was locked out. And so he had developed some miraculous abilities, and so he flew up to this open window at the top of the recital hall, and then he descended down into the assembly of monks so that he could attend. And so afterwards, Gyaltsab said, "You broke a major vow. You're not supposed to show your miracle powers." So he used that as the way to expel Nolan Drakma from the monastery so that he could accomplish this potential that he had. And so he went afterwards, Nolan Drakma went to Tsongkhapa and told him the situation. And Tsongkhapa gave him a rosary and told him, "You can found a monastery for every bead on this rosary." And he gave him his blessings. And it said that Owen Droppa did just that. And every time he would found a monastery, he'd put one of the beads from the rosary at that site. And the last bead, the name of the monastery, got called Now Complete. So, so anyway, that's the story. But that's who Tsongkhapa composed this poem for. It's a very famous one. I try to, Sarmik and Rinpoche had us memorize this. So I try to recite it every morning as part of my beginning, getting myself motivated for the day. I hope you find it useful. Any questions or thoughts or?
I do actually.
Sure.
So this is one of those things. It's really fascinating, by the way, and but it's easy to understand academically, I think. For me, I sort of put this in direct opposition to, I don't know how familiar you are with like Western philosophy, but like Plato's forms, which is ridiculous. I don't know if you know it, but it is. Um, but how does one know if they are truly understanding it in a way like practice wise? Like, yes, I can explain it to you. I can give you, what the concept of this is, but do I really get it? And so what do I look out for to know whether I'm actually getting or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make total sense to me. And I think my experience is it's something that deepens the more I practice and the more I continue to contemplate it and work on it. It gets deeper and deeper. Um, you'll know if you're on the right track because if you're on the right track, your afflictions and your clinging to mistaken notions of yourself should diminish over time. They'll start getting carved away until you get to a more realistic sense of dependent origination and emptiness and how those two might work together. And that's not divorced from how you see yourself. It's very intimate to how you see yourself and your mind working. And so, again, if your afflictions are going down and you're getting a sense of more and more profundity from your contemplations, you're on the right track. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
And so ultimately, if you get genuine bodhicitta, as I said last time, you enter the first path of the what are called the five paths. The first of those paths is called the path of accumulation. It's also called armoring. That's when you become a bodhisattva because you develop true bodhicitta. If you're not on the bodhisattva path, let's say you're on the hearer path and you just develop true renunciation, then you've entered the first of the five paths for a hearer. Um, but here's the rub. I think I should say this and then I'll get back to the point I was making. Samurai Rinpoche summed it up this way. He said, if I have a vase of beautiful flowers and I want to use them for Dharma practice, if I take those flowers and I offer it to the Buddha Dharma Sangha with the prayer, may I have a long life, a healthy life, a prosperous life, then you offer that to a shrine, let's say. He said, maybe you'll make a little bit of virtue, but that's not yet Dharma practice. That's not going to have a long-term benefit to you, right? But if you take that same vase of flowers and you offer it to a shrine, Buddha Dharma Sangha, and the prayer is, I'm really tired of this cycle of existence and of being born into states of misery, particularly the lower realms. Please keep me from the lower realms and please help me find my way to be free from this cycle of suffering. And then you make the offering. That becomes true Dharma practice. And because of the nature of your motive, when that one action ripens into a result, it will bring you freedom from lower realms and liberation eventually, because that was the motive that you entered into with the action. Similarly, you take the same vase of flowers and you offer it to a shrine, and your prayer is, I can't stand seeing all beings suffering. I want to become completely enlightened so that I can help all beings go beyond suffering and establish them into a peace beyond all suffering. Please help me to do this. Then that virtue becomes measurable. And that cannot ripen in anything else. It keeps the first two things, good health, prosperity, all that. It keeps freedom from lower realms and eventual liberation. And on top of that, it becomes a cause for your complete enlightenment and the benefit of everyone. And so a lot depends on your motive entering in. But if you have that motive of bodhicitta for your path, you enter that first level of the five paths of realization. And then if you develop that bodhicitta, it becomes stronger, stronger, stronger until you're able to perfect your concentration with it. Then you begin to enter the second path, which is called the path of preparation. To enter that path of preparation, you have to get correct view. And so what we just talked about today, when you realize everything is dependently originated, therefore it has no self-nature, and you really have that really clear conceptually, and you perfect your meditation, you've entered that second path. And you have your motivation of bodhicitta, you've entered the path of preparation. There are four levels of the path of preparation as your meditation and your wisdom get deeper and more able to cut through your afflictions. And then when you perfect that meditation to the point that it becomes calm abiding with totally accurate conceptual understanding of emptiness and dependent arising, you enter the uninterrupted path of seeing. And you go from a conceptual understanding of emptiness to seeing it directly in deep meditation. And at that path, you enter the third level of the path of seeing. That wipes out all your conceptual um, misunderstandings you developed in this life. It starts cutting away from underlying afflictions that are deeply held in your psyche, and you go through 10 bhumis or 10 grounds of the path of meditation, which is the fourth level. That takes a long time getting through those 10 bhumis because you have to come back into that meditation, that direct meditation on emptiness again and again and again and again. Every time you do, you're burning away deeper and deeper levels of afflictions until you get rid of the grossest afflictions, then the next level of them, and then the next, and more refined levels. And then finally, when you burn through the last of the afflictions, you enter the seventh bhumi and become a mahasattva, where you are no longer in samsara. You are free from samsara. And you go through the last three pure bhumis until you become completely enlightened. That's the fifth path, the path of no more learning, where you're completely enlightened. So anyway, that's the path. You got it in your hands. And so anyway,
I have a question, may not be appropriate here. Working on the sutra path, I was spending a lot of time in my meditation, trying to negate the self and realize I'm not self-existent from my own side, that I am dependently arisen. And I wasn't able to get to that point, I thought. And then I had a couple of out-of-body experiences, and they call it a near-death experience. I think it was a death experience. And when all those times I left my body, I was still me. I knew the body wasn't
right,
me, and I didn't want to
right,
go back at all. It was like, nothing to
right,
do with that. But
right.
there was a still strong sense of me
Yeah, yeah.
after I came out. So obviously that told me, yeah, it wasn't getting anywhere fast.
No, no, it doesn't mean you're not getting anywhere. It points to how tenacious the innate level of self-grasping
Self
is,
is.
right? Um,
Yeah.
which is why as you get into higher levels of practice, you aim not only to get rid of the mistaken notions about the self at a conscious level, gross conscious level, but you start working on subtler and subtler and subtler levels of mind until you actually, there are higher levels of practice where you try to get in touch with the mind at the time of death to purify that as well, of that self-grasping impulse we've been bound by from beginningless time. So it doesn't mean you're not making progress. It means you're on the next level of, okay, I still got some work to do. I might even
And
have
then
death experiences or be outside my body.
my
But
other meditations were trying to develop bodhicitta. So I would purposely focus on people I didn't like, trying to like them, love them, feel compassion for them. Um, I was very happy on the sutra path, working it, but somehow felt that maybe my strong sense of self needed more, and I won't say I was pushed, but encouraged to take tantric path.
Mhm.
And now I struggle because my meditations take time away from where I was.
Uh-huh.
And there's two stages to most of my stuff, the first part and then the second part. And I'm visualizing myself as some others and trying to generate that feeling. Um, I can accept that, okay, this is helping me to grasp that I'm not self-existent. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
thanks to that non-existent self, I can become a Buddha.
right.
If I were self-existent, it'd be impossible to be a Buddha.
Yeah,
It
you'd
it
always be
wouldn't happen.
stuck.
So that's helping there. And the second part is definitely helping because I'm getting to more subtle layers, but I'm I don't know. I don't mean to be derogatory. I feel like I'm wasting time.
Well, we can only do the best we can. Um, hmm, for the rest of, not everybody here maybe has that level of practice yet,
Yeah,
but
I
I,
didn't want to bring it up, but
well, no, it's okay because I wanted to use this occasion to give people a very happy announcement. Um, you mind if I do, and then I'll come back to your question? Um, I just got confirmation yesterday from Geshe Tashi
my Rinpoche.
confirming that Yumi Kenshin Rinpoche will be here in DC at MSTC on the weekend of August 14th, 15th, 16th. And he'll complete a teaching he started a few years ago on Tsongkhapa's narrative of realizations, in which Tsongkhapa talks about his own path to realization in his life and how he got there. And it gets exactly to Bobby's last question, which is how do I know exactly how to make the best use of my
Okay.
practice to make the most progress? And so it's contained in that poem by Tsongkhapa. He talks exactly about what's essential, what you can leave out, and how to focus. And so Yume Kenshin Rinpoche will be teaching on that very thing that weekend. The following weekend, he's going to be at the Samaja Center, which is nearby us, teaching the 50 verses of how to go to a guru and how to make a proper relationship with the Vajrayana guru. And then the following weekend, the last weekend of August, he will give Yamantaka initiation to anyone who wants to enter the level of practice that Bobby's talking about. And that will be in Connecticut at the NKL, the center there. And then the weekend after that, he will give Vajrayogini initiation, which was one of the main practices Serme Kinrinpoche taught for 25 years here. um, and that practice, both of those practices, Yamantaka and Vajrayogini, very expedient for getting to subtler and subtler levels of the mind and dispelling that wrong view from its roots. So anyway, we'll have a lot more to talk about, but I'll just say that much. Does that help, Bobby? The help is on the way in terms of, because
Yeah,
it's a
it
really,
helps to know that there's a teaching that addresses that.
it's
That's
exactly,
absolutely amazing.
it's exactly what Tsongkhapa talks about. And it's so profound. We're having Art come down to translate, Art Engel, who's top scholar, living Western scholar of this. And Yume Kenshin Rinpoche will be using a commentary to go into details about the poem. And my experience last time is it just blew me away, and so useful.
And when you say the Mahayana Sutra and Tantra Center of DC, where is that? Is that in your
It's,
house or is that
yeah,
someplace else?
this is it.
Oh, okay, all right.
All we got. This is all we got of it. It's our house. But we have a sister center in New Jersey. That's MSDC New Jersey, and that's an arts house basically in the temple there. But we're all that's left from Sarah Mae Kinroche brought to us. So, and we'll stream it. I'll find a way to stream it. So if you can't come here directly, but I went way over. Um, any
Sorry.
other? No, no, perfect. um, any other questions before we do the dedication? Okay, I'll share the screen and bring up the closing prayers. Sabi Bogi Jojin Meton Tam Rira Linjin in the Gambadia, Zange Jindu Midda, Wagi, Dogu Nanda Jingla Jabasho, Idan Guru Rananam, Kamne Yatayami. Gawadi Gawa Khan, Sunam Yasha Zozo Shin, Sunam Yasha Lejun, where Dabo Kuni Dobasho. Jean-Ju Zanjo Rinpoche, Amage Bana Gegeji, Gyaba Nyaba Meba Yang, Gone Gondu Bewa Sho. Gari Rawe Koe Shingande, Bendande Wa Malu Juene, Genrezi Wan Denzen Gyazo Yi, Chebe Side Bado Dengyu Chi. So this is our last class on this subject. Do people want to go forward? And if so, what subject? Um, I could suggest maybe um, maybe Lojong, mental training. Think about it. And if you have ideas, you can email us. Right. But anyways, good to see you all. Everybody take care.
Thank you so much. Are you feeling better or
You.
still?
I'm still a gimp,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
but I got this rollator from Sharon's mom, so it helps me get around.
Oh,
So anyway, but we'll see you next time. All right.
thank you so much.
Have a good one, everybody. Thanks, Wilson.
Thank